I think some of the challenges have not reared their head as big as they might have done, because we have, by maybe by accident, maybe by dint of what we were getting right, we managed to deal with them or perhaps anticipate them. Um, I would say that the critical problem, and this is about the wider world and where we are as human beings. And I don't want to wander off too quickly into the big things, which I do think are so important, and I'll try and come back to that. So the problem of funding is there, of course, if you live in a world where the key policy for older and disabled people is social care, if you live in a world, as we do in the UK especially, where social care is seen as basically a marginal policy and treated as such, then you'll immediately have a sense that there isn't a political understanding of the priority of issues, even if you're trying to adopt a hard-nosed political attitude that need to be dealt with by that policy. Putting it crudely, as the Joseph Rowntree Foundation found out years ago, if you put a small sum of support in, and that means a small sum of money, the impact that you can have on older people's lives in preventing things getting worse and people being incapacitated, made more dependent, having a poor quality of life is massive. That lesson has never been learnt. So we have a process here of social care, which is still from the old poor law of the 19th century and before, where you have to prove what you can't do. And then if you are lucky, because even if you can't do it, you still may not qualify for help. So it's about proving what's wrong. So trying to prevent problems, trying to enable people, as we have sought to, because we have always worked according to the social model of disability developed by disabled people and the idea of independent living developed by disabled people. The logic of that is that what we're really aiming for in a society is that if you are a disabled person, a person with a long-term condition, with a broad definition as government has for disability, then the key thing is to enable people to live their life on as equal terms, which may not be possible about everything, as non-disabled people. That means putting support in. And putting that support in could be of all sorts of things to live that life which you're capable of. It's not about you being so hopeless, so dependent that you can't live the normal life. They'll never get a job. They'll never get a family. How are they going to look after children? Holidays, what's that? I mean, even holidays, and how would they go on holiday? And so it's to prop you up because you're seen as less of a person, a dependent person who will always be dependent. And that's the history of understanding of disability and essentially of aging, with an appalling segregation of people, where disabled people wouldn't go out, where older people were confined to home. Every year, we are such a boring family, we do the same holiday, and that means going, whether we were living in London or now we've moved to East Anglia, to Norfolk, and to be near the sea. And what's fascinating is to see how arrangements increasingly over the years have been such that it's very commonplace, or certainly it was before COVID, to see 3-generation families, sometimes 4, and often those families would be families with wheelchairs and people who had obvious physical impairments, and sometimes there would be other impairments too, having their holiday, be able to get on the Broads boat in Norfolk because they've made it accessible, being able to get on a beach because it's been made accessible. Sorry, being encouraged as a consumer, that your 5 quid's as valuable as anybody else's 5 quid, as opposed to the not distant past, when people did not have those opportunities. If it was a holiday, you were lucky, you'd probably go on a group holiday with people from an institution. And I'm not putting that down, but it's not quite the same thing as being part of a wider mainstream world, doing the things that people are encouraged to do and maybe want to do in our world. So I put that down. When I see people doing that, you know, I think, oh, there you are. That's the achievement of people like Mike Oliver and Colin Barnes and Jenny Morris, all these people who were pioneers in the disabled people's movement. That's the fruit of their efforts. It's not about just theorizing. It's not about necessarily crossing some of the other barriers which are still out there, but it's about the routinization of challenge to the idea that disabled people are essentially dependent, cannot live a mainstream life, don't have equal rights. And I realize that still is in there powerfully and has been reinforced with the kinds of politics that we've had increasingly over perhaps this century. And I say that not as a lightweight opinion, but based on the evidence of the way that we know, one, that social care works, it's reaching fewer and fewer people, offering those people less and less appropriate support, and two, the way that the benefits system administered by the Department for Work and Pensions works, in the sense that while the amount of fraud and abuse in that system is minimal, and it's evidenced, that the way people are treated as disabled people or older people who are disabled, turning to it as if they were on the make and need to be assessed rigorously because probably they are trying to swindle the system. And this is a terrible statement of where we are as a society. Mm-hmm. And it's part of the challenge that we seek to make alongside other user-led organizations by validating the experience, the knowledge, the understanding, the rights of disabled people in the way that really means something, that we as disabled people are in charge. Not in charge so that we devalue non-disabled people, but in charge in the same way as I think people who are Black and minoritized want to have their organizations, want their voices, and women are not necessarily that keen on having blokes explaining to them what it is they really want in life. And why is it any different for us as disabled people or people with long-term conditions, or mental health service users? And why will we ever get it right so long as we don't listen to the first-hand voices? I find it shocking when I've looked at it, speaking as a Jewish person, where there are all sorts of racialized stereotypes operating, some of them are unbelievably terrible, and still going, still an undercurrent that I know that Jewish people experience. But it's interesting, I feel, the way that you notice that, kind of like in a weird world of prejudice, these characteristics are not only imputed to one group, but like they get imputed to several. So, and I don't say this to perpetuate racist attitudes, but to remind us of just how appallingly powerful they've been, that women, and that's how the psychiatric system judged them into the 20th century, women are over-emotional people, hysterical, controlled by their uterus, who cannot make rational decisions, and actually in the psychiatric system would be sexually interfered with as part of that understanding. But they can be quite good on the feelings. Then Black people who can dance quite well, not very good at rational consideration, but I suppose might be quite good with the feelings. And so it goes on. And the stereotypes of LGBTQ people, I mean, they're a parallel. It is utterly terrifying. And, you know, in some societies still, it is illegal to be LGBTQ and trans. And these are the big issues. You can't isolate the struggles that we're having in shaping our lives from what are broader issues, which are about how people see each other, people and themselves. It worries me how much we are encouraged not to see ourselves as people who might become poor, who might have an illness, a condition which actually would lead to the end of our life. We kind of, it's all to be pushed out there. And we actually also are encouraged to push people like that out there. And one of the surprises I had when we were doing research work on palliative care and social work involvement in it was the way that service users, people who were dying and their families, would tell us. And I know it's become more of a recognized issue since that often friends would cross over the road because they didn't know what to do or say. And people talked about the social workers working with them as having the qualities of a friend, when often friends couldn't manage it. And that was because of fear and uncertainty, in the same way as we know there's all sorts of fears generated in our society in relation to disability, particularly in relation to people who experience mental health problems. And saying to people, just talk about how you are, when we at the same time live in a world of the DWP, which will absolutely harass you potentially as a mental health service user, it's too glib and simple. We've got to rethink how we connect with each other, and we've got to be more kind of able to own all that any one of us is, our strengths and weaknesses, whatever our identity, rather than listen to the sort of siren voices of politicians who set us against each other, or those teenage mothers, those lone parents, those people on benefits, those, and so on and so on. And I think we are subject to that. And it's interesting that my partner works as a welfare rights worker now, having retired as a social worker, and she would tell you about people, and it's a solid script which she hears repeatedly. I've worked all my life. I've never, ever got benefits before. And then I hear about the person down the road and they're scroungers and they get loads more than I do. None of which is true. Where are they getting these messages from? I know where they're getting them from. They're getting them from the mass media. They're getting them from government, DWP and politicians. And we have to fight that. And I think that shaping our lives is part of that struggle to help all of us own who we are, own what might be our lives, our future, and get the kind of help from each other that we really want to have, not what people might assume, not cozy shots of people sitting in a circle in a residential service, but, you know, it's ironic, isn't it? It's about like charity. We are determinedly not a charity. That's something people have never wanted to be. And I've often thought this and sometimes had the courage to ask people, everyone thinks it's a jolly good idea to give to charity. Ask people whether they want to receive from charity. And very few people will actually say, right, absolutely, it's what I want. Because it's inherently not an equal relationship. And I think it's been wise that people have always, you know, you can think of organizational reasons why it could be frustrating that you get cut off from sources of money. But I think everyone's been pretty wise recognizing that it's not necessarily a good idea. And if we want to treat each other with respect, if we want people who are involved in an organization like ours to be rewarded for what we do, then that's much more possible on the basis that we work rather than as a charity where you can't pay people as directors, for example, as trustees.